episode of Black at Indy. Last week we had our Literally Black at Indy episode where we had different groups on campus to come together and to just talk. Not necessarily about their organization, but what it means to show that we have different experiences of blackness within the black community on campus, which was so awesome. So if you didn't check it out, go. But I want to start talking today about sleep paralysis and some underlying conditions about how that can relate to trauma. So I'm going to read a chapter, or at least a section, out of the Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health by Dr. Rheeda Walker. And it says this. Okay, I just lost the page. I'm coming, y'all. Oh, here we go. Sleep paralysis. It says, the last anxiety-related problem that I want to mention is sleep paralysis. It is one that is understudied in general, but seems to be more common in black people compared to white people. Sleep paralysis is just as it sounds and occurs just as you are falling asleep or just waking up. It is not a problem per se, but can be a bit freaky because you are awake but inexplicably unable to physically move. It is a temporary experience that lasts for a few minutes or less. Experts do not know a lot about sleep paralysis, but have said that it can be caused by stress and trauma. And right before that, there's a sentence here that says, child victims do not outgrow trauma. If unaddressed with a professional, these victims are affected for the remainder of their lives. And then it goes on to talk about surviving R. Kelly and some other things. And if you don't know what the whole situation is with R. Kelly, just Google it, but I'm pretty sure you know. Needless to say, there are a lot of things that have been happening in our world, specifically a few days ago. No, actually on Sunday, Regina King, for those who do not know, her son had died by suicide. And he was very, known with her. Every time she would go somewhere, he was always attached to her. And so I don't know what that's like in that sense. I'm not a mother, I'm not a father, but I do know that the relationship between a mother and son is very special. I can say that I have had a brother, a god brother, who actually died by suicide. He was, at the time TJ passed away, I think he was about like 11 or 12. And so my grandmother had found him with the rope around his neck in the closet. So needless to say, like having those experiences are very traumatic. And so whenever they're not discussed, they can come up in different ways, and it can be manifested in some, if not handled, it can have some results that can play a strong part in our lives. So needless to say, there are some things that you do need to speak about with somebody. Please find someone to talk to. But yeah, so what do you all want to chime in on about that?
You just took us on a whole rail.
I know.
So, for one, especially in regards to just suicide and mental health overall, like if you need help, please ask for it. I recently just had a friend who I love very much die by suicide as well at the start of 2022. So, like, if you need help, please ask for it. And similarly to what the book said, sleep is also an important part of that. As college students, we sometimes say, sleep when you're rich. Sleep right now.
Yes.
It's very important. It's important to your overall health. And please, just ask for help if you need it. Go seek it. Don't be afraid. And sometimes it's just okay to not be okay.
Yes, I just saw that post today. Somebody said it's okay not to be okay. And it is.
I think this is this is very much like sleep paralysis, where if you don't know what's happening, like if you just wake up and you cannot move, it's the most terrifying thing ever. Like I thought this is it for me. I guess I'm stuck like this for forever. But like once I knew what was happening, once I learned about sleep paralysis, I was like, oh, it's okay, it'll pass. Like I just gotta chillax, and then I'll wake up and be able to move again.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same thing with mental health. And when people start having these feelings and these thoughts, where if you don't know what's happening, if you don't know what anxiety looks like, if you don't know what depression looks like, it just is terrifying. Like you don't know what's happening to you, and you don't have the words to explain it. And I think within the Black community, we don't have a lot of that rhetoric. We don't talk about mental health a lot. Like if you go to a therapist, you're crazy, all this other stuff. And so I think that part of just knowing, first of all, and knowing within yourself, but also to spot it amongst your friends, to do all this other stuff, is so key and important into integrating the rhetoric of mental health into the Black community.
Yes.
I agree.
Literally, Erda's point makes me think about the conversation I was just having with my grandma last week. I called her to obviously give her grief about all of my feelings and all this other things, but the first thing that I said was, Grandma, I'm tired. And I know my grandma, and I don't know why I phrased it like that, because Like where she comes from, they just hiked up their bootstraps and they did what they had to do.
My grandma, same way.
And so my grandma's like, you're tired. Like I knew I immediately caused a panic for her because I'm pretty sure if I'm tired, it's the end for me. Like it's very extreme for me. Whereas when they were tired, they had to keep going no matter what. And so my grandma was looking at me like, are you going to keep going? Are you okay? And that's another conversation that we need to have is like, life is hard for us, but that is not a reason to keep going. I used to have a self-hierarchy within myself, like, oh, there are people out here that want to see me do bad, which is, a great mindset to have, but it's not a great mindset to keep you going.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's actually detrimental. So
Exactly.
please don't be like me. I'm taking it out and learning. But like mental health, it's a process, and you have to continuously work on it, and you have to gain the vocabulary and the rhetoric to be able to even grapple with the feelings that you have.
Yeah, and no one should have to live or work hard to prove them wrong.
Yeah.
That's just it.
Why can't we just exist? Ugh,
Literally.
what a radical thought.
I'm learning.
But that's all though. All right, cool.
Okay, so my topic is mostly closely like going towards the beginning of January, and like unfortunately we're like at the later ends. But I wanted to talk about Haitian independence and specifically Jumu. Am I saying it correctly? Okay, I want to make sure I'm saying it correctly. But so when I was on my social media, I didn't realize that I had this many Haitian friends.
Yeah.
To start there, and then for two, I guess this was actually my first time seeing Jumu, seeing people eat it, make it. So I was like, what is this? What's the significance of it? That's what I was saying. To me, it seemed like a cousin of gumbo because like a lot of people associate the creation of gumbo with slavery and like how it came, like at one point it was just people putting a lot of stuff into the pot, especially food that slave masters would not eat. I was like, wow, our histories are so connected. But I'm like, I knew about the Haitian independence and the revolution, but I didn't know about Jumu. I didn't know about the significance of food and like it's just how our food culturally connects us to our history.
Yeah, right. Like I think it is so interesting how it's the opposite. How like gumbo was stuff that they wouldn't eat, but soup jumu, because of the revolution, like because it was like January 1st is like the day we won the war. And so after we won the war, it was like, oh, the pumpkin, jumu, that's what it translates to, like is like only white people can eat that. And then what I've been told my whole life is that like because slaves like didn't have good teeth because they don't have dental insurance, then they made it into a soup so that they could like eat it because they couldn't eat it like in its chunky form because they didn't have teeth.
Wow.
And so that's why they have soup jumu every single January 1st. Every Haitian, wherever you live in, like whether you're still in Haiti or you're an expat, like you are having soup jumu and you are celebrating, the first, and I think a lot of people say the only successful slave revolt ever, like in the world. And so it's just like I love that part of our history. I love how we were like sticking it to the
Sticking it to the man.
the French who were like, oh, only we can eat pumpkin. I want to talk about, I've been trying to talk about this for a while, but there's been current events. But I want to talk about intersectionality and what it means to not just be black, but to be a black woman. And so I feel like it's a thing that we don't think about, we kind of take for granted, but it's this idea that advancing, like if we think of civil rights leaders, like we're thinking of male civil rights leaders, and advancing like the movement for black people with that male-led, like doesn't necessarily mean also advancing it for black women, and how sometimes those two things can intersect because of intersectionality, and how it can they can run counter to one another, right? And so we read this article in one of my classes last semester about how this lady wanted to do an article about black women and domestic abuse like in their homes. I want to say in LA, and she not only got pushback from like white people who were like, no, like there's no, you know what I mean? There's no domestic violence. We don't want to talk about that. We don't want to deal with this issue. She also got pushback from the black community because they were like, we don't want to portray or keep portraying black people as more violent, black men specifically as more violent. So we don't want to talk about domestic violence.
First of all, deep, heavy.
Yeah,
I have so many things to pick from what you said. I think the first part is that I think, especially when you look at the civil rights movement, I'm always saying where are the women? And no offense to Rosa Parks, but someone other than Rosie Parks.
Oh, yeah.
Where's the Fannie Lou Hammers? Like, where are these women who were out there working, getting beat, potentially a survivor of sexual abuse, and all of these other things? Where are they at the front for working hard? Another thing that I also say all the time is black women, the key to everything.
Black women are some powerful figures.
The
Like,
key.
This part.
When you look at all waves of feminism, specifically within the black community, you will hear black women saying that for the longest, black men are not for us. They are for the patriarchy. They are concerned with the menness and the maleness of society. They are not concerned with, okay, how do we move this society forward for black men, black women, and black children?
Yeah.
Oh, and not to forget that black women also made to add queer women, lesbian women, all of these women that we are thinking about now, black women have been saying that since the 60s and before.
yeah.
Audre Lorde, who I'm thinking about specifically.
I just read her name like 5 minutes ago.
That's my babe. That is my mother poet, is who she is. But she has a essay, and the name is not coming to me, but it's like uses of erotic as a power. And like she gets a lot of pushback for this, but essentially her claim is like she calls all black women lesbians, and that like you really have to read it. I know that I can't like fully explain it right now.
Oh, now I have to.
Oh,
yes.
Teaser.
But like,
that's intense.
but like she said, there's a particular way that black women have cared about other black women, and like although some of it is not romantic or intimate, it's still lesbianism. Like you have to see how she puts it, and I was like, wow. Like Audre Lorde says a lot of stuff, especially in regards to lesbianism and intersectionality.
I'm so glad that you brought up like feminism on the other hand, because I talked about how like the advancement for black people was kind of, let's say, problematized by the two opposing wants of black women versus black men. But it also happens as a black woman that white women, and I feel like this is documented and talked about a lot, how white women are just like, well, in order to advance our cause, we can point to voting rights as like one of the biggest ones.
Right.
We have to cut you out. Like we can't have voting rights because black women are part of our movement, and it's going to be a harder sell, and so we're just going to cut you right out. But we're going to use you for protests, we're going to use you for numbers, we're going to use you for all these things of like the identity politics of being a woman in order to mobilize literally 50%. I think a lot of people forget women are not a minority. So it's not like, you know, we're less numbers than it, we are actually more than men. But in order, like, we're going to use you for all these things to mobilize our cause and to give legitimacy. But when we get to the finish line and when the kind of, you know, the foot hits the pavement or whatever, like, and white people start saying, oh, we don't like that black women are part of this, we don't like that women of color are part of this, they're just cutting us right out. And this happens over and over and over. So it's also the same thing where being a black woman, like, again, like, you have these two opposing, like, wants of white women versus black women, and how the gap of that, or how the intersectionality of being black and being a woman leads to you falling through these gaps of both the feminist movement and the civil rights movement. And then now we got to do our own thing. We got to do Black Girls Rock. We got to do, you know what I mean?
Black radical feminism, like literally all of the categories that exist out of feminism specifically for black women is as a result of the exclusion of black men excluding us from our own civil rights movement, and also women excluding us, white women specifically excluding us from these white movements.
I don't disagree at all. Like that is very true.
Black man.
Hey,
black
you
I know, and it's not me. I love my mama.
Oh, do you?
And the funny thing is, I even think about like movies where I've seen the black man always trying to get into the white spaces to prove that he is just as good as they are. But I never really see him, like, in a sense, like, bring along his family.
Yeah.
He's doing it so that way he can have his face in the larger context of people who are equipped, who are competent enough to fulfill this, you know, whatever the obligation is. But it's, but everything you're saying, I can see it.
It's still it's like, I think there's a saying about how we don't just want diverse masters, like we want to revolutionize the entire system so that there's no like person at the top. So it's not like or it's in the civil rights movement, it can often feel like black men are just trying to get right where white men are, right? But still keep the same system, the same hierarchy. Just now we're gonna add some color, right? Diverse masters.
Jeez.
And then a lot of radical feminism is like, nah, the whole system gotta go.
Gotta go.
Yeah.
And
Ain't
that's
nobody
the
at the
difference
top,
between
at
us,
the bottom,
literally.
literally, like equality, like
Yeah.
true equity for
Yeah.
all. And that's, again, it's radical. And I think the other point about how, like, because we are at this intersectionality, like, it might, like, black women might be the key. Like, if we had voting rights for black women, there's no way you could have said to not have it for white women as well.
Yeah.
There's no way you could have said to not have
Yeah.
it for, you know, all these other classes, right? And so, like, in order to bring everybody forward, we could have just brought black women forward, and then that would have been voting rights for black men and white women, and, you know, but we just go one at a time, you know.
Okay.
We start with the lighter skin, and then darker skin. We start
Listen.
with the male, and then, like,
It's all on the spectrum.
Black women are out here fighting for everyone.
Listen.
Everyone, and they are attacking the most basic systems and institutions that we think work. Black women are constantly working against them.
Oh yeah,
they hurt us the most, right? Yeah.
and to bear so much, but like have so little. Yeah, that's something. Black women, we love you. And remember, black men don't cheat.
Yeah, right.
All right.
Yeah,
Well,
right.
for next episode.
Roll our eyes to infinity.
Oh, shoot. Well, listen, y'all, that's all we got for today. We thank you so much for checking us out. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and follow us. We got some great stuff coming up for the semester that you do not want to miss. All right, that's all we got for today. See y'all later.